Raider Nation, what's good? Welcome to another episode of the Silver and Black Sports Network podcast. Today was a big day for the Raiders because they welcomed the 49ers to town for joint practices. Those are always a great time. We'll be diving into how Geno and the offense looked. Bit of a slow start, we'll tell you why, and what we saw out of Ashton Jeanty as well. He looked pretty good. And defensively, a slight concern that popped up for me. We'll dive into that. And we've also got a great interview today with Defensive Guru Cody Alexander from Match Quarter stopping by. That is good stuff. If you like deep dives and deep dives into schemes in particular, you're going to love hearing Cody's take on the Raiders defense and what Patrick Graham can do back there. So with that, let's get it rolling. Okay, before we get it going, real quick, I want to remind you guys to subscribe to our free newsletter on silverandblacksportsnetwork.com. There we hit you with even more practice takeaways and deep dives into some topics that we don't always hit here on the podcast. Again, we do have a paid version. It's only $6 a month, and for that, you get the best Raiders news and insights delivered right to your inbox every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday mornings at 6 o'clock. But there is also a free version as well, so keep that in mind. And thanks to our training camp trial offer, you can actually get it free till at least the 22nd of August. Good stuff. Please do check that out. It's also the best way to support us and the growth of our business that we got going here to providing you guys some of the best Raiders content we possibly can. So please do go check that out. But before we get to the practice takeaways and all that stuff, we have an awesome interview for you guys today with Cody Alexander of Match Quarters. This guy is one of the best defensive minds out there. He coached at Baylor back in the day, so obviously he's got the coach's mind for the game, and he's even written 6 books on defense. That's 6 books on just defense alone. You're not going to find many people out there who can dive deeper into a defense than this guy, and you can check out his stuff and subscribe to his work on matchquarters.com. I've been a subscriber to his work for quite a while now. I love it. I read it all the time. If you're a football nerd, that's a place to go for some really quality coverage on defense. But before you do rush off to go and do that, here's our chat with Cody breaking down the Raiders defense and what Patrick Graham brings to the table as a defensive coordinator as well. All right, Cody, thanks for joining us, man. We were talking before we got this going. Perfect timing for you to do that deep dive on Kyu Blu Kelly. This is a guy that very clearly has turned heads for this coaching staff and is now getting reps with the ones. What caught your eye about his game that made you want to do that deep dive?
Yeah, just the footwork is really what I was looking at. The play that I broke down, it's not really a great it's not a great route by the receiver, but a lot of times you can find within that the technique and transitions that you really want. Also, him being able to kind of play the route stem. Anytime you get a vertical route stem like you saw in the breakdown, you're probably going to get some sort of a comeback. In his ability, he never took his eyes off the receiver. Once he saw that, he attacked the top shoulder and then was able to transition and attack the ball. In fact, he almost got the pick off of it. So anytime I see I'm a DB guy, so anytime I see really good DB technique, I'm going to nerd out on it.
Yeah, definitely. And for anybody of you guys out there that haven't checked it out, make sure you do check it out. Match Quarters is Cody Alexander here, obviously. And I tweeted that as well, so make sure you check it out on there. But I want to get your take just on the DBs as a whole, more so the corners on this Raiders team. You know, we mentioned the fact of Kyu Blu Kelly. He's rotating in with the ones. They seem to really like what they have in Darien Porter, the rookie out of Iowa State. He's gotten a lot of first-team reps as well. And then opposite that, it looks like Eric Stokes is going to be the other guy out there. Of that grouping, what's your kind of feeling on how they'll stack up against the rest of the league?
Yeah, I think that this is the biggest question mark, really one of them coming in. Because, I mean, you look at it and it's just, even their nickel, when you look at it, who's going to play nickel? What kind of quality are you going to get? Eric Stokes was a first-round draft pick that just never really could figure it out with the Packers. And not that he didn't have enough opportunity. I just think it was one of those where it was probably time for him to move on. Hopefully you can find something, sometimes when you go to your second place, you can grow a little bit. You can be in a different situation. The thing with Darien Porter, played in a heavy zone scheme in college. So you're coming to another heavy zone scheme with Patrick Graham. So I think that transition, to me, that one makes a lot of sense. And so you're just trying to build a little bit of a base. I mean, I like Jeremy Chinn as a down safety. One thing that Patrick Graham is going to do is going to run a bunch of cover 3. And he was doing that before Pete Carroll was there. So it's not necessarily something like, oh, Pete Carroll's there, they're going to run a bunch of cover 3. He was doing that, but I think they have a guy in Jeremy Chinn. You don't want to necessarily play him from depth a lot. We saw that really kind of play out with the Commanders. They kind of morphed into more playing him near the box. And I really like Polamalu. The more that you watch him, he really flashes at times. And I know that he's going to have, he's going into his third or fourth year. So I'm excited to see him. So you have these bits and pieces that are kind of interesting how they work together as a whole. Look, I like Patrick Graham as a defense coordinator. I think he's one of the more underrated coordinators in the NFL. So I have full belief that he can get this to work.
Yeah, and I agree with you on the Patrick Graham cover 3 thing. I think people forget, like when he first showed up, that he ran a lot of that, and now the talking point is like, oh, Pete Carroll, he's forcing it on him, and that's definitely not the case. And we'll get deeper into Patrick Graham and the scheme in just a bit here. But I do want to talk about Darien Porter, depending on how familiar you are with him. But he's an interesting prospect because, this is a guy that was a former receiver in college, but comes in with that exact frame that Pete and those guys really like and are looking for. Has anything in particular flashed to you about him, when you looked at him?
Well, not anything other than, look, he's not going to be essentially a premium corner coming from Iowa State just because they don't play a lot of man. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the thing. So if I'm a fan, what makes a first-round corner? What makes that? It's the ability to play man at a high level. Even though we are in a zone-centric era for the NFL right now, we're still in a match-heavy world within that zone base, which means a lot of times these corners are left on an island playing in man. It's not just this two-deep shell that everybody thinks. We're not playing Tampa coverage. We're not playing two-man. In fact, two-man is dead. Nobody plays two-man anymore because we have running quarterbacks. So I think for a guy like that, length, being able to play zone, ball skills are all things that translate to the modern game and to the game that Patrick Graham is trying to play. So when you look at a kid like that, Iowa State played a 3-high system, and you're like, well, that doesn't really translate to the NFL. So what are we talking about? Well, corner in those systems really doesn't change that much. Whether it's cover 3, that was a quarters-based system. In fact, they've transferred. Again, that's another misnomer about that system. A lot of people think it's just a Tampa system, and it's not. It's actually a quarter system, plays a lot of cover 3. So he's got a lot of experience with different coverages, different techniques, fitting the run, which is something that I think having a physical presence at corner, a lot of these guys, that's a non-negotiable anymore. There are no more Deons that you're just like, hey, I'm paid to cover guys, right? Yeah. I'm not a guard. So to me, with a guy like that, length, ball skills, former receiver, that all screams, obviously this was a Pete Carroll pick in a cover 3 system. And this is, to me, it works.
Yeah, Pete even said, he kind of fits, what we're looking for. He was like, that's definitely one that people are going to be able to figure out who really wanted him. Jokingly, it was pretty funny. But you did talk about Jeremy Chinn, and he's one that I do want to touch on a little bit more because we've seen Patrick Graham really favor that big nickel look where they roll Chinn down into the slot. What's your take on that package with him in particular and that kind of usage for him?
To me, that's where he needs to be. I mean, I think that's where he was designed to be. I mean, we're seeing the same problem play out in somebody that's very similar to him in New England with Duggar. Is that they're really, Vrabel's coming in, they want to run cover 3 and quarters. Well, Duggar's really a down safety guy. And, for a long time, Belichick was able to kind of hide him and use him and move him around as a leveraging tool. Chinn kind of ran into that last year with the Commanders. This was a defense, if you go back to the Cowboys, that played a bunch of cover 1, right? And so how did they had to switch and kind of morph over to more of a zone defense with the Commanders and play a little bit more of a 2-high shell, which is really kind of the meta right now in the NFL, is playing from a 2-high shell and then disguising your coverages. That 2-high does not mean quarters. It doesn't mean cover 2. It just means we're playing from depth. Yeah. And so for a guy like Chinn, playing that box safety, that's what he does. And so I think, too, it goes in line with the NFL trend of finding bigger bodies at nickel and being able to match up against a 12 personnel team. Some of these teams, like, for instance, the Lions, that want to play a lot of 12 personnel, put an extra lineman on the field, even staying in the own division, the Bills are notorious for kind of like with Detroit, putting a sixth offensive lineman out there playing with 12 personnel. So it makes sense. It's where we're headed offensively in the NFL, and having a guy like him, if he can play more near the box, I think that he'll have a successful year.
Yeah, one of the buzzwords obviously is like the positionless type player, and it seems like a lot more of those guys are coming around, and he looks very similar to that. A lot of us have been saying he's like the chess piece for Patrick Graham in this defense, so it has been fun to kind of watch that develop in practice. You talked about it. Obviously, he's really good tackler and all that stuff. Coverage-wise, what's your worries there on him?
Yeah, you don't want to get in a situation where it's third and long and he needs to play deep safety. That's just not what he's built to do. It's also, too, if you get in a situation where, hey, we got to play a lot of quarters this week, or because we're getting a lot of crossing routes, or this is what we put in it, or, hey, we need to play man coverage right here. Even a tight end, he's going to struggle consistently. That doesn't mean he's not going to make plays, but consistently. You saw this with the Commanders last year as they tried to peel away a little bit more of his man reps as the year went on, just because he's a big physical presence. Playing man coverage just is not in his wheelhouse.
Yeah, and I'm curious, too, because like I said, we've seen Patrick use this particular package a ton. Is this almost something you think can see being more of a base defense for them, that big nickel look with him rolled down?
Yes, I could see him as like the Sam linebacker, right? The Tyrann Mathieu position. When he kind of came into the league and played. We're seeing this. This is a trend all around the NFL. Ravens were trying to do it until they had their guy get hurt. Now they're kind of stuck with, they still have the three safeties, but they were trying to get four. We saw Jesse Minter with it, getting Molden, allowing Derwin James to go down. The Eamon Worry kid from South Carolina, drafted by the Seattle after they'd had their little four safety experiment that didn't work out last year. We're seeing this time and time again. Even with the Broncos going after a Jahdae Barron in the first round, who's essentially a safety nickel hybrid. Mm-hmm. We just saw two nickels get paid this offseason. Jalen Petrie on paper, because you got to put him in Madden somewhere. He's a safety, right?
Yeah.
But he doesn't play safety. He plays nickel. And so I think, to me, having a guy like that and basing out of, this is a 4-2-5 defense. Yeah, they have a Sam linebacker. They can get into a 4-3 if they want. But they really want to play that. And I think you could see big nickel being more of that base, because Chinn does give you a little bit more athleticism than, like a Jermaine Pratt, or an Landon Roberts, or even a Devin White, of just like, hey, we can have a little bit more of a matchup in this with a DB instead of a true linebacker.
Yeah, and speaking of the linebackers, one guy that's joined the linebacking core this year for them is Jamal Adams, and it's been interesting. He's come in as the will. In practice has looked good, like, I'll be honest. I tried to be like, all right, let's temper expectations. I know he's a name and all this stuff, but all of us in the media that are watching this are thinking like, okay, he's an interesting wrinkle here, and I think he's going to be more of a package type guy. But what do you think about his skill set and how it translates to kind of that matchup looks, where it's like, yes, he may be in there on like a 4-3 base, but it's not really a 4-3 with him in there, right?
Yeah, I think, I grew up really in coaching in 2011, 2012, and 2013, working at Baylor for Phil Bennett. And we ran a 4-2-5 quarter-space structure. Our Sam linebacker was a safety that was converted to linebacker, right? Our will linebacker, though he was a will, he also was a 4-5 kid and weighed 220 pounds, right? So he could run, right? And you had to in the Big 12 back then, because everybody was that uber spread, everything. That's what we saw every day from Bryles. So I think like having a Jamal Adams, to me, what this is, you talk about package, this is your dime bag.
Yeah.
He's going to be able to go in there on a passing down. He's going to give you the ability to cover a tight end or to cover a running back, but he's also you're not going to sacrifice if somebody decides to get in 11 personnel and run the ball on a third and medium, you're not going to lose anything in the box. And so the combination of Chinn, I could see a big dime. I know the Chiefs, there were instances last year where they had 4 safeties on the field. And so don't think for a second that, look, it's a copycat league. Everybody is watching. I know this is hard because, I told you before the show, I'm a Broncos guy at heart.
Hey, you're not supposed to say that. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
Fan, not a fanatic. But it's hard to talk about the Chiefs. But look, the Chiefs defense, everybody's watching them every week. They want to see what is Spagnuolo doing. The 5-man pressures with quarters behind it. He started that whole trend a couple of years ago. Now the Vikings picked it up. Flores is now carrying that torch. But having the ability to have 4 safeties on the field when you're in like a second and long, you think, like, for instance, playing the Chiefs, their 12 personnel isn't 12 personnel like everybody else. It's not even close to what the Raiders 12 personnel is like. Right. So it's more a passing. So you kind of have to play a hybrid structure against it. I think it gives them more tools. You can really see, this is where I get really nerdy about it. Look, I love scheme, but I also love team building. And you can really start seeing, I was interested too when Jamal Adams was like, maybe it's just one of those, Pete's bringing his guy back just to kind of culture guy, like the Urban Meyer, Tim Tebow deal.
Exactly.
But then you really start thinking about it, and it's like, hey, wait a second, this actually makes a lot of sense. If they're trying to play some more of this like big dime stuff that he actually gives you, because that's what he is really, really good at, is playing down and playing as a box safety.
Yeah, it's an interesting look. And again, like I've been trying to temper the expectations because I'm like, let's not get like too wrapped up in it all. And also too, just to note, you guys and Raiders fans can, come together in your hatred for the Chiefs, I'm sure. So that's where you guys can all bond and be okay 100%. With the fact that we got a Broncos fan on the podcast. But, I just want to get your take too overall. Like we've talked to him to a bunch of different packages that Patrick Graham likes to run. I think he's a very underrated defensive coordinator. What's your take on him as a whole? And what do you think is going to be the bread and butter with the personnel that he does have? And where do you think they could struggle as well? There's a lot of things to ask in that, but.
Well, with him, I think you kind of look at some of these guys like a Jim Schwartz or a Gus Bradley that do one thing and they do it, they'll be okay at it for a while and then they kind of trickle away because there's really no necessarily creativity around it. Gus Bradley is notorious. He's obviously not in the league anymore, but for the Colts, he was a 4-3, 4-2-5, cover 3. They just ran it every single time and it didn't matter, And then you have Schwartz, who's really tied to running kind of that 4-3, 4-2-5, cover 1. We want to run everything, do cover 1. We don't have a lot of creativity out of it. So Graham, as a cover 3 guy that's running a pretty, basic 4 down front, they can move guys around and they can get into odd spacing, which just means that they close the B gaps, they don't have an open B gap. So your typical 4 down front, they can get into some of these 5-man fronts. They can do that, but he's really a cover 3 guy. That's what he wants to run, but he does it in such a way where every week it can be a different game plan. Where every week we're attacking an area, every week we're showing a different wrinkle within it, or we're aligning in a different way, or we're using a different package. And I think for him, that's where I really enjoy watching the Raiders defense with him is that, look, you're probably going to get this coverage off of it, but you don't know how it's going to be presented, what it's going to look like. Maybe he plays a zone side and a man side, so it's a hybrid 3. Maybe it's an all match all the way around, so it can basically look like cover 1. Mm-hmm. Maybe they roll to a side or they drop a safety in a unique area, and I think that to me is really just leaning into the front structure of like, hey, look, we really think Kuntz and Crosby can really hit home, and leaning into that, and then kind of having that, I call it like passive pressure in the back end where you don't really know. You kind of have an idea what the end result's going to be, but you don't know how we're going to get to it and where we're going to kind of leverage our backstops, which are the safeties in a cover 3 system.
Interesting. Yeah, I love that breakdown, man. Obviously, I have to get your take as well on the offense and a lot of new pieces on that side of the ball. Geno Smith comes in. What's your take on the Raiders offense as a whole and how much improved they are? Because, from the outside looking in, it looks like bringing in a guy like Geno, especially based off of the quarterback play they had last year, is a massive upgrade.
Yeah, to me, that's it's the start and the finish, the quarterback situation. Look, Geno's probably not going to get you to ascend. Like you're not going to get in a situation where it's like, okay, because I do think that he can perform at a top 10 level. Can he do it over 17 games? It's kind of been proven. You kind of are who you are at this point, but he's kind of one of those guys too. And this is always an argument in the NFL, especially with fans, is if your guy isn't a legitimate top 5 guy, right? Then you're just arguing the argument's sake because everybody else is in that quarterback purgatory. I mean, because I live in Dallas, so I hear the Dak stuff all the time. And it's like, guys, Dak's a top 10 quarterback when he's healthy, man. Like, just be happy he's on your team. I think for Geno, he can elevate this offense a lot. I mean, look, the quarterback play for the Raiders has been atrocious the past couple of years. I don't have to tell you that. Everybody listening to this already knows that. So I think that he gives you he probably gives you a higher floor.
Definitely.
I don't know if he can ascend and give you even a higher ceiling. I do think the way that this is mapped out, though, is that you're going to run the ball a lot. You're going to get Geno in some really good situations where he can throw to the tight ends. You have two really good tight ends in Brock. Brock Bowers is the ultimate kind of joker. I think he will, in the West, I think he will replace Kelsey as kind of that guy at tight end in the West. He's going to end up, being, hey, this is the next hybrid guy that can flex out, play receiver. He can carry the ball. He can do a bunch of things, basically what Travis has been able to do really for the last decade. So my biggest concern offensively is just at the receiver position. Do you have guys that you feel comfortable in winning a one-on-one, or can they get you a play on it's 3rd and 7, we got to have it. Can you get open? Geno will get you the ball. Can you catch it? Can you be open? What is that going to look like? I think, too, the offensive line has always been relatively good. So Geno's obviously going to have a better line than he had in Seattle. So I think you have it. It's just also, too, you were talking about expectations. You were just also in maybe like the AFC West and the NFC North are just absolute, black and blue every single week. They're going to beat each other up, and they're also going to be probably the better teams in that division. So I think it's one of those where we feel really good about it, but we're probably a year or two away, and we're hoping that like the Chargers implode, or Bo Nix it was fake what he did last year, and he doesn't, and then hopefully like the Chiefs, their karma runs out or something. So it's just one of those where you can see the path. You're going to have to run the ball a lot, and I just don't know if you can win a lot of games in the AFC doing that.
Yeah, when you look at the quarterbacks in that division, it's going to be hard to make a living that way unless you can really eat clock and keep the ball away from those guys. Right. I am curious, though, how much you think that Chip Kelly is going to live in 12 personnel with the team that he does have right now?
I don't see why you would not. You don't have a dominant receiver. I do really like the Jack Beck kid at slot. I think in just being able to play, you just look at it and – you have Jacoby Meyer, Trey Tucker, Dante Thornton Jr. You're looking around and it's like, who's the guy? And so if you're going to be in 11 personnel, and really I think it affects you more. Who are you going to, now you're taking Michael Mayer off. You're Brock Bowers. You're going to move. He's a move tight end. You're going to move him around. Well, now you're really basically in 10 personnel.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. So you can't live. Look, Cliff Kingsbury tried that and it didn't work. Steve Spurrier, people forget, like Steve Spurrier tried that too. It didn't work either in the NFL. Like you can't live in the NFL in 10 personnel. It just doesn't work because your offensive line can't hold up. So I think you start looking at it, you live in 12 personnel. You have a dynamic guy that he can look. I think this is one of the better coordinator pairings with a head coach that I think now coming back understands. I don't think like there were situations where they were trying to do some things in Seattle where they were trying to run the Fangio system, but he really didn't want to let go of what they were doing. I think having that time off coming back, you don't hire a guy like Chip Kelly and you don't keep a guy like Patrick Graham to meddle.
Exactly.
And so be the head coach, let them go. And look, Chip Kelly's mind, and he's a football dude. And that's what, he talked about why he took that job at Ohio State, because he just wanted to call offense. He didn't want to deal with anything else. Well, guess what? You're in the best place. Now you're in the NFL. All you're doing is doing ball all day long. You don't have to do anything else. You don't have to recruit. You don't have to call anybody. You don't have to talk to your 17-year-old kid that you're trying to get, over here to Columbus, Ohio. You can go in there and just talk ball, do your thing, draw up all the weird stuff that you want to. So I'm excited. I think it's going to be a little interesting. They need to find talent at receiver, obviously, but I think this isn't – if there's anything, and I hate silver linings, but if there is a silver lining in it, is that you can see the forward momentum for this organization and that it's actually going to – I'm actually really excited to see offensively what this is going to look like.
Yeah, and again, Raider Nation, that is a Broncos fan saying that he's excited to see what the Raiders are going to do. So keep that in mind. That's high praises there. Cody, I would love to keep talking to you. I don't want to take up too much of your time. We might have to bring you back on when the Broncos and the Raiders are playing, because that would be a lot of fun. For the people at home, tell them what you got coming up, what you're cooking, because everything you drop is gold. I'm always tapped in to whatever I can, and I am a subscriber to the newsletter. Got to go for the paid version, though. That's what I'm about to jump on after this one.
I appreciate it. Yeah, matchquarters.com is where I host everything. I also have a YouTube Match Quarters that I throw. Most of the free videos that are up there are also on Match Quarters. You can find me socially on X at @the_coach_A, and then obviously Match Quarters, really one word for all the other socials. But I cover the NFL pretty exclusively, and then I do some Power 4 stuff. So I do anything that's going on at the college level, I'm pretty tapped into as well. So I've got all of my NFL reviews are pretty much done after this week. So if you want to go back, I did some stuff. I thought the blitz package stuff that the Raiders did this year was really good. I covered that. So all you got to do is go in the search tab, type in Raiders, type in whatever team you want, and I'm sure I've written about them in the last couple of years.
Yeah, hey, fans always clamor for like a deeper dive and a really good breakdown. This is the guy you can get it from, so do make sure you check his stuff out. Cody, again, thank you for your time, man. We really do appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate having me on.
Man, I can't thank Cody enough for that. Really, you guys do need to check him out on matchquarters.com. I'm not kidding when I say that. I've been a fan of his work for a long time now. I've been subscribed to his free version of his newsletter for years, and he provides such good insight on that free version. And as I said, though, I will be signing up for the paid version as well, because again, he just does something that nobody else does out there. He's really provided a great service for so many people, and I really do enjoy his work. I say it all the time. Anytime I have ads or anything like that, and this isn't an ad, but anytime I have ads, it's always going to be something where I wouldn't be pitching it to you guys if I didn't enjoy it. And I brought Cody on because I saw that he did that breakdown of Kyu Blu Kelly, and I just really enjoy his take and his mind for the game. And obviously the timing is perfect because Kyu is actually getting the reps with the ones as well. Pete was really complimentary of him. So the timing was perfect, and Cody, again, just brings in such great insight to defense. So please do check him out. He was kind enough to hop onto the show and has been a big support for this as well. So do check him out because it's always good stuff from him. Now, let's get to our practice takeaways, guys. We'll start with the offense. Things got kicked off right away in one-on-ones. That was like, you could feel this like slow build as both teams are warming up, getting ready to get out there and get going. And on the first play of one-on-ones, who is it? Brock Bowers takes off on a corner for a touchdown, setting the tone quick. Ashton Jeanty went out there, ran a route out of the backfield on the very next play. Didn't quite work out. A pass got broken up, all that stuff. I believe that one was against Fred Warner. Fred Warner is going to beat a lot of people. That's kind of a welcome to the NFL moment for a guy like Jeanty. But Jeanty did have a good day. We'll get to him in just a second. But it was a bit of a slow start offensively overall for the Raiders, particularly in 7-on-7. As I said, Fred Warner, different dude. He is one of, if not the best in the league at what he does. And he was flying around all the underneath stuff. He was there. Early on, too, Trey Tucker was struggling a bit, had 2 drop passes at one point as Trey was taking off, kind of running like a bit of an over route. Warner stayed over the top, cut him off really well, and Trey kind of stopped running. And so Geno just kind of threw it away. And it was just it was one of those things where you're like, all right, he's having a tough day. And then, Warner goes and cuts him off. Great play there. It's like, all right, this guy needs to kind of get his head in it, And I think Geno even recognized that as well. After, a bit of a slow start for him, Geno goes over to him, taps him on the head. They had a bit of a conversation, and Trey did turn it around later. We'll get to that, in a second, but I'm trying to go chronologically here of how things went. So from that slow start in 7-on-7, I walked away thinking like, oh man, all this good stuff that we've seen throughout camp. Now we're not seeing it when the bullets are starting to fly, against a really good team in the Niners, who is also banged up. So keep that in mind. But the Raiders did turn it around, got it going a bit there. And on the second play of team, that is, Ashton Jeanty, he broke his second run there. And it was very clear that the Raiders were trying to get him going early. You know what I mean? Like they wanted to feed him the ball, get him hit a couple times, and get the offense going, and also the offensive line too. And so they opened up some good holes early on in that team period for him. I think Ashton overall throughout the course of the day had a couple runs that he would have broke off, and so that was a good thing to be able to see. Now, was it like eye-popping, oh my God, this guy's going to be the second coming of Barry Sanders? No, but it was a solid day for him. After practice, Geno even mentioned that with Genty, on one of the plays that he did break, it was one of those things where the previous day they had run it and he hadn't quite understood it. Geno didn't go too deep into the weeds on it, but he didn't quite understand, whatever was particularly going on and didn't make the right read or whatever it was. And they corrected it. And today went back to that play and boom, he took off. So like what I saw out of Ashton back there today was the good vision, the twitchiness, reading his lanes. It was real quick when he sticks that foot in the ground to find the hole. It's that very much that slow to fast through type of thing, and you definitely can see that burst once he does see the hole. It's and he's gone, so I was impressed with what I saw out of him. I know some people wondering, well, like, hey, we haven't heard you guys hyping up a ton of Ashton Genty throughout camp and all this stuff. Like, he has looked good, and it's almost kind of a thing where like we can't talk about him every day, you know what I mean? And like he makes plays every day and looks good. It just hasn't been like these like 40 and 50-yard runs all the time. He's not ripping those things off, but in doing the dirty work, he has looked solid. I think the biggest thing is we just need to see more from the offensive line. And we did see it at times here in the running game today against the 49ers. They also looked really good in pass coverage, pass blocking as well. They gave Geno and Aiden some time. Aiden made some pretty good throws as well. I was impressed with his performance as the twos were going. So I would say overall a solid day for them. It didn't really look like Geno was on the run or anything like that often. He even said afterwards he was able to go to sometimes his fourth or fifth reads and even looking backside and stuff like that. So he had time in the pocket. Again, the Niners are dealing with some injuries. Bosa wasn't out there. There's a handful of other guys that weren't practicing. So do keep that stuff in mind. But you can't control who it is that's out there across from you. And I thought the offensive line did look pretty good today against the 49ers, against some new blood, against a team who you don't know their schemes. You didn't game plan for it or anything of that. So you're just kind of reacting. I thought it was good. And I do want to note Jackson Powers-Johnson was the starting right guard in that unit. So you had Colton Miller left tackle, Dylan Parham left guard, Jordan Meredith at center, Jackson Powers-Johnson at right guard, and DJ Glaze on the right side there. And I thought all of them, that whole five starting unit, who I think will end up being the guys come kickoff in New England, I thought they all held their own. They looked good. It wasn't any like glaring weaknesses or anything like that. So I was impressed overall with the group, even though I said it was a slow start for the offense as a whole, in particular Trey Tucker, which I was like, man, like you guys have heard me talk about him so much. And I was like, this guy's been killing it in camp. And then all of a sudden, again, when you got another team coming in and a really good team coming in, he starts struggling, dropping the ball, and the route against Warner, all that stuff. And you could tell it was getting to him. He's like, dang, like you could see it hurt him. You could see he was in his head a little bit there. And so we were like, is what we've seen kind of being tarnished a bit here? Well, that wasn't necessarily the case, because as soon as the offense got the team, they started getting Brock and Jacoby involved, and that's really when things started turning around. Brock and Jacoby really down low, playing off of each other very well. Again, they live in that 12 personnel, but those two guys in particular stood out in a big way. It was very clear they made a conceded effort to get the ball, obviously to Brock, but to Jacoby as well, doing the dirty work in a lot of different areas. And Brock really doing it at all the different levels, along the field. I mean, he's catching those short to intermediate routes. He's going deep. He's doing everything. That's not a surprise to anybody that watched him last year. So that's a dude that really is going to be a driver of this offense. Not that I'm going to surprise anybody by saying that, but once Brock and Jacoby got going, that kind of just opened the whole world for this offense. And then they started taking the deep shots with Trey Tucker, and it was like a total 180. This guy looked like the Santana Moss that Geno Smith said that he is the spitting image of, making some diving catches in the back of the end zone, two of them actually for touchdowns, in pretty quick succession of each other. So I was really impressed with the response from Trey, because he is still a relatively young player at the end of the day, and for him to be able to respond the way that he did, that was massive. So I think he ends up leaving, probably winning the day after what was a slow start. And I think that's something when the coaches go through the tape, they're going to be like, hey, man, love the response. Yeah, it was a brutal start for you. You maybe were in your own head or whatever it was. But then all of a sudden, just bam, when they needed him most, when they took those deep shots, when they pushed the ball down the field, he was looking really good after what, again, was a slow start, especially trying to, connect on those deep targets. So once again, they got the underneath stuff going. A lot of the smoke and mirrors and all that stuff that we've been talking about, the Chip is going to be implementing in this offense. And then, boom, over the top to Trey. Very clear the guy can still run, and he showed what we've seen throughout practice as well. And it's good to see him be able to do something like that against a team like the 49ers. Now, let's get to the defense, and I'll be completely honest, guys. Look, while we are watching these joint practices, it's usually great when we have like 2 days of joint practices because you can pick one day to watch the offense and one day to watch the defense because they're both going on simultaneously. And like we're a bit restricted of like where we can go and where we can watch from, So we were able to get much closer to the offense. So that's why I have so much takeaways from the offense today and why I'm able to talk much more about them. Defensively, they're much further away, a little bit harder to watch and see, So it's just tough, and there's a lot going on. You're sitting there almost playing that game of tennis, looking from one thing to the next and trying to catch one rep and then, boom, shoot your eyes over and catch the next rep for the starting defense or whatever unit is out there to be able to give, a good takeaway of things. So I'll be honest, I don't have a ton that I can give you defensively. As I said, they were far away. But what I did see in particular, George Kittle and Ricky Pearsall, those were guys that were getting open, as you would expect. More so with Kittle because, let's be real about who he is, And that was with a couple different guys in coverage. Obviously, Chinn covered him a couple times. We saw in the slot when, Darnay Holmes matched up against him as well. Kittle's just one of those dudes who is one of the best doing it, and he's going to find a way to make some plays, and he was doing that. I think the concerning part was Ricky Pearsall doing it as well. Again, younger guy, still kind of establishing himself in the league, and obviously got a good play caller, and he's got Purdy back there who can distribute it and all those different things. But Pearsall was able to get out a bit, and again, the more concerning thing is that this is a Niners team that's a little beaten up, so they don't have their full stable of weapons out there. But so I would say defensively, the coverage was a bit of an issue, I think, on the back end. Not some massive glaring issue, but I wanted to see more out of the defenders, specifically the DBs, the corners. I saw Eric Stokes get beat, a time or two by Ricky Pearsall. He's a guy that's looked really good throughout practice, so far. I didn't really get a good read or get to see much of Darien Porter. That was one that I was hoping I'd be able to catch a glimpse of. Didn't really get to see him. Kyu Blu Kelly, got some good eyes on him, and Pete had a lot of great things to say about him. And I always want to say Kyu. It's Kyu Blu Kelly. But Kyu really did play some good ball. He has really taken hold of the opportunities that have been thrust in front of him by this coaching staff. I think they really saw some things they liked from that preseason game in Seattle, so they've started mixing him in with the ones, and he's starting to really improve. And you guys heard from Cody Alexander when he broke it down. Again, go to my Twitter, go to Cody's, wherever it is, check out his website, matchquarters.com, and you can see his breakdown of Kyu Blu Kelly in that particular snap that he was talking about. But it's very clear that this kid has good instincts, and he looks like a guy that now is like seeing that opportunity that's being thrown in front of him now by this staff. They're like, hey, you've been playing well. Let's see how you fit in with the starters, and sometimes guys can come alive with other dudes around him, and I think that's what he's done so far. He did flash at one point. I don't remember who it was in coverage against, but I do remember seeing him get in there to bat a pass away, and he's just shown, he can shuffle his feet when he gets in that little bit of a shuffle when a guy is, trying to just, like when a guy's taking off and it's like, okay, he's not going deep, but is he going to hit on a comeback? Is he going to snap it and go to a curl? He's real quick in like getting that shuffle and realizing at the point of when they go to break, like he's got real quick speed to be able to like boom and close and get in there for the pass breakup. And that's been something that's, been impressive for me to be able to see of a guy who like probably all of us didn't really expect a whole lot out of. At one point he was rolling with the three. So like good on him to work his way up. Another thing I did see from the defense, they looked really good in the red zone. I definitely will say that. They gave up, a deep pass to Juszczyk at one point. He scored a touchdown. I couldn't tell at the time. Again, kind of jumping back and forth. I caught the tail end of that play. I don't know who was in coverage, but you don't want to be giving up deep passes to fullbacks, H-backs. I know he's a different type of dude back there. But either way, you don't want to be letting guys run loose like that. Very clearly, the Niners can hide a guy like him, and that must have been what they did on that particular play. But overall, really good work from them in the red zone from what I saw. Lots of incompleted passes. From the ones and twos, really. They forced a field goal as well. And Max, as you would expect, he was juiced up for this practice. He was doing his thing to start early on, was very disruptive coming off the edge there. And, look, he started to do his thing, and I think that's when Shanahan was like, okay, we need to throw more bodies at him. So they started throwing more things at him. Max even talked about that after practice as well. And then obviously it gets a little quieter when you're throwing 2-3 bodies at him sometimes. And Max has been known to ruin some practices. And I think, he was kind of heating up, and that's when you can see that guy get rolling. So they started throwing more dudes over there so that they could get their work in. But again, overall, good day from Max. I believe Tyree get in with a pass breakup as well, or a bat down, so was impressed with what I saw from the guys on the front there as well. I wish I could have gotten a better look at all those guys, but I guess that's really what we're going to see more now in the preseason game, specifically, Thomas Booker IV. That's a guy I really want to be able to watch much more now. Obviously, he played in that preseason game against Seattle, which none of us expected, but now he'll probably get a lot more burn. He's a guy that Pete said is competing for some real playing time, competing to be a starter on this defense. So now as we go into that preseason game, it's going to be fun to watch what that rotation looks like and who really takes hold of things in that game. But again, like I said, I was impressed with the little bits that I did catch from the defense. My one concern was the coverage on the back end, and obviously that is something that we're going to be looking out for with this team because there are some question marks at corner. Lots of talent, lots of young talent. It's just mostly unproven, and Eric Stokes is trying to show that, he can be a guy because, like I said, he is going to be the starter on one side there. Unless something crazy happens over the next couple weeks here, he looks like he's going to be one of your outside starters at corner. The big question will be now this brewing battle between Darien Porter and Kyu Blu Kelly. Those are the two guys to watch right now as we stand here on Thursday, August 14th. Again, things can change after a second preseason game, but needed to see more out of those guys in coverage. We'll see how they fare in the actual game itself. But anyway, guys, that is going to do it for us for today's show. Practice is not open to us tomorrow. It's going to be more of a walkthrough, so no podcast for us. But I will be over there at Allegiant Stadium this weekend for their second preseason game against the 49ers. We'll drop a post-game breakdown podcast from the field there at Allegiant as soon as we can after we finish interviews post-game. I've got some stuff to be able to do the podcast remotely. I'm going to be testing that out in the next couple days here, and as long as all goes well, I will be shooting that down at the field. So I hope it works because I think that'll be cool to take the podcast out there on the road in a sense, to Allegiant Stadium out in the field and do it that way. I think it'll be a cool look. And then the goal is, if that works, to be able to do that for week one, out there in New England. I've already got everything booked for that. I will be in New England. It's just a matter of really shoring up the remote setup to be able to do this thing and still make it look good. Because at the end of the day, we want the Silver and Black Sports Network to look a little different than some of the other stuff you'll see out there. I want it to look real professional, because that's a nice little add-on as well. So we'll see how that all goes. But as I did mention at the top of the show, guys, if you aren't already subscribed to our newsletter, please do head to silverandblacksportsnetwork.com and subscribe to get that delivered right to your inbox every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 6 a.m. You can do that for free. If you take advantage of our training camp trial offer, that gives you access to everything, and then you get to try it out. You can cancel it any time if you don't like it, but again, there is a free version of that newsletter where you'll get the Friday version of our newsletter, which is just chock full of a bunch of awesome stuff. So please do check that out, and make sure you do like and subscribe to this podcast wherever you are listening to us. If you liked what you heard, hit us with a 5-star review and leave a comment as well. We always do appreciate those things. The comments have been off the charts. You guys have been saying that a lot of folks in the Raiders forums are starting to talk about me and what we're doing here, and that's awesome. I even talked to Hondo. He said some guys reached out to him and were asking about me, and Hondo's a good dude. He said, he's like, hey, Jesse knows what he's doing. He's a good guy. I mean, look, I've been around the team, since they moved to Vegas and even covered them in their final season in Oakland. So I feel like I built up a little bit of a rapport, but anytime I hear about people supporting me, I really appreciate that. And I love that Raider Nation is taking notice of what we're doing here. So do share it with your friends. Do share any and all of our content, specifically the newsletter at silverandblacksportsnetwork.com. And also, again, this podcast too, because all of that stuff helps us grow and helps me to be able to pump out more and more content, more and more quality content for you guys, because that's definitely what I want to be doing. But anyway, guys, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And we will catch you on Saturday after the game over at Allegiant Stadium.